Section 11 of Confessions, volumes 1 and 2. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Recording by Martin Geeson. Confessions, volumes 1 and 2, by Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Anonymously translated. Section 11. Louise Éléonore de Warrens was of the noble and ancient family of La Tour de Py, of Vevey, a city in the country of the Vaudois. She was married very young to a Monsieur de Warrens, of the house of Lois, eldest son of Monsieur de Villardin, of Lausanne. There were no children by this marriage, which was far from being a happy one. Some domestic uneasiness made Madame de Warrens take the resolution of crossing the lake and throwing herself at the feet of King Victor Amadé, who was then at Evian, thus abandoning her husband, family, and country, by a giddiness similar to mine, which precipitation she too has found sufficient time and reason to lament. The king, who was fond of appearing a zealous promoter of the Catholic faith, took her under his protection, and complimented her with a pension of 1,500 livres of Piedmont, which was a considerable appointment for a prince who never had the character of being generous. But finding his liberality made some conjecture he had an affection for the lady, he sent her to Annecy, escorted by a detachment of his guards, where, under the direction of Michel Gabriel de Bernex, titular Bishop of Geneva, she abjured her former religion at the convent of the Visitation. I came to Annecy just 6 years after this event. Madame de Warrens was then 28, being born with the century. Her beauty, consisting more in the expressive animation of the countenance than a set of features, was in its meridian. Her manner soothing and tender, an angelic smile played about her mouth, which was small and delicate. She wore her hair, which was of an ash color and uncommonly beautiful, with an air of negligence that made her appear still more interesting. She was short and rather thick for her height, though by no means disagreeably so. But there could not be a more lovely face, a finer neck, or hands and arms more exquisitely formed. Her education had been derived from such a variety of sources that it formed an extraordinary assemblage. Like me, she had lost her mother at her birth, and had received instruction as it chanced to present itself. She had learned something of her governess, something of her father, a little of her masters, but copiously from her lovers, particularly a Monsieur de Tavel, who, possessing both taste and information, endeavored to adorn with them the mind of her he loved. These various instructions, not being properly arranged, tended to impede each other, and she did not acquire that degree of improvement her natural good sense was capable of receiving. She knew something of philosophy and physic, but not enough to eradicate the fondness she had imbibed from her father for empiricism and alchemy. She made elixirs, tinctures, balsams, pretended to secrets, and prepared magistry, while quacks and pretenders, profiting by her weakness, destroyed her property among furnaces, drugs, and minerals, diminishing those charms and accomplishments which might have been the delight of the most elegant circles. But though these interested wretches took advantage of her ill applied education to obscure her natural good sense, her excellent heart retained its purity. Her amiable mildness, sensibility for the unfortunate, inexhaustible bounty, and open, cheerful frankness knew no variation. Even at the approach of old age, when attacked by various calamities, rendered more cutting by indigence, the serenity of her disposition preserved to the end of her life the pleasing gaiety of her happiest days. Her errors proceeded from an inexhaustible fund of activity, which demanded perpetual employment. She found no satisfaction in the customary intrigues of her sex, but being formed for vast designs, sought the direction of important enterprises and discoveries. In her place, Madame de Longueville would have been a mere trifler. In Madame de Longueville's situation, she would have governed the state. Her talents did not accord with her fortune. What would have gained her distinction in a more elevated sphere became her ruin. In enterprises which suited her disposition, she arranged the plan in her imagination, which was ever carried of its utmost extent, and the means she employed being proportioned rather to her ideas than abilities, she failed by the mismanagement of those upon whom she depended, and was ruined where another would scarce have been a loser. This active disposition, which involved her in so many difficulties, was at least productive of one benefit, as it prevented her from passing the remainder of her life in the monastic asylum she had chosen, which she had some thought of. The simple and uniform life of a nun, and the little cabals and gossipings of their parlor, were not adapted to a mind vigorous and active, which, every day forming new systems, had occasions for liberty to attempt their completion. The good Bishop of Bernex, with less wit than Francois de Sales, resembled him in many particulars, and Madame de Warrens, whom he loved to call his daughter, and who was like Madame de Chantal in several respects, might have increased the resemblance by retiring like her from the world, had she not been disgusted with the idle trifling of a convent. It was not want of zeal prevented this amiable woman from giving those proofs of devotion which might have been expected from a new convert, under the immediate direction of a prelate. Whatever might have influenced her to change her religion, she was certainly sincere in that she had embraced. She might find sufficient occasion to repent having abjured her former faith, but no inclination to return to it. She not only died a good Catholic, but truly lived one. Nay, I dare affirm, and I think I have had the opportunity to read the secrets of her heart, that it was only her aversion to singularity that prevented her acting the devotee in public. In a word, her piety was too sincere to give way to any affectation of it. But this is not the place to enlarge on her principles. I shall find other occasions to speak of them. Let those who deny the existence of a sympathy of souls explain, if they know how, why the first glance, the first word of Madame de Warrens inspired me not only with a lively attachment, but with the most unbounded confidence, which has since known no abatement. Say this was love, which will at least appear doubtful to those who read the sequel of our attachment. How could this passion be attended with sentiments which scarce ever accompany its commencement, such as peace, serenity, security, and confidence? How, when making application to an amiable and polished woman, whose situation in life was so superior to mine, so far above any I had yet approached, on whom in a great measure depended my future fortune, by the degree of interest she might take in it, how, I say, with so many reasons to depress me, did I feel myself as free, as much at my ease, as if I had been perfectly secure of pleasing her? Why did I not experience a moment of embarrassment, timidity, or restraint? Naturally bashful, easily confused, having seen nothing of the world, how could I, the first time, the first moment I beheld her, adopt caressing language and a familiar tone, as readily as after 10 years' intimacy had rendered these freedoms natural? Is it possible to possess love, I will not say without desires, for I certainly had them, but without inquietude, without jealousy? Can we avoid feeling an anxious wish at least to know whether our affection is returned? Yet such a question never entered my imagination. I should as soon have inquired, do I love myself? Nor did she ever express a greater degree of curiosity. There was certainly something extraordinary in my attachment to this charming woman, and it will be found in the sequel that some extravagances, which cannot be foreseen, attended it. What could be done for me was the present question, and in order to discuss the point with greater freedom, she made me dine with her. This was the first meal in my life where I had experienced a want of appetite, and her woman, who waited, observed it was the first time she had seen a traveller of my age and appearance deficient in that particular. This remark, which did me no injury in the opinion of her mistress, fell hard on an overgrown clown who was my fellow guest, and devoured sufficient to have served at least 6 moderate feeders. For me, I was too much charmed to think of eating. My heart began to imbibe a delicious sensation, which engrossed my whole being, and left no room for other objects. Madame de Warrens wished to hear the particulars of my little history. All the vivacity I had lost during my servitude returned and assisted the recital. In proportion to the interest this excellent woman took in my story, did she lament the fate to which I had exposed myself. Compassion was painted on her features, and expressed by every action. She could not exhort me to return to Geneva, being too well aware that her words and actions were strictly scrutinized, and that such advice would be thought high treason against Catholicism. but she spoke so feelingly of the affliction I must give my father, that it was easy to perceive she would have approved my returning to console him. Alas! she little thought how powerfully this pleaded against herself. The more eloquently persuasive she appeared, the less I could resolve to tear myself from her. I knew that returning to Geneva would be putting an insuperable barrier between us, unless I repeated the expedient which had brought me here, and it was certainly better to preserve than expose myself to the danger of a relapse. Besides all this, my conduct was predetermined. I was resolved not to return. Madame de Warrens, seeing her endeavors would be fruitless, became less explicit, and only added, with an air of commiseration: "Poor child! Thou must go where Providence directs thee, but one day thou wilt think of me." I believe she had no conception at that time how fatally her prediction would be verified. Section 11. Recording by Martin Geeson in Hazelmere, Surrey.